දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, tough control. Sri Lanka records over 500 COVID-19 cases for the 13th consecutive day as some isolated areas taste freedom. No discrimination. Health authorities call for public support and understanding in COVID-19 burial issue.
We can't control a disease targeting a certain fraction of the society.
Another rebuttal. The government hits back at S&P Global's rating action, calling it disappointing and premature. Opportunity waiting to be availed. Ambassador of Afghanistan sees great potential in trade with Sri Lanka and insists on laying the groundwork.
Pandemic is there and it's slowly being resolved, but we shouldn't wait for that. Sri Lankan products are of higher quality.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Saturday the 12th of December 2020.
නව සන්ලයිට් සකුරා දැන් දිකුකල් පවතින සකුරා මල් සුවඳින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamke Kanaka. Let's start with the local stories. Sri Lanka is experiencing concerning consistency in the daily COVID-19 case numbers, with patients in the excess of 500 being reported since the 30th of last month. Colombo remains the hotspot for the virus, reporting the highest number of daily cases. Health authorities continue to call on public support in the country's fight against the second wave of the coronavirus. Now here's a look at the latest situation.
Since the 30th of last month, not a single day passed without over 500 COVID-19 cases being confirmed on a daily basis. It is on the 2nd of this month that Sri Lanka saw its highest single day cases, with the confirmation of 878 infections. During the course of yesterday, the health authorities confirmed 762 fresh cases spread across 19 districts. Not so surprisingly, Colombo district topped the chart with 445 infections. Within the Colombo municipality limits, Mattakulia reported 175 cases, while 49 cases were confirmed from Dematagoda. 35 cases were confirmed from Maradana, 36 from Slave Island, 32 from Vellavatta, 26 from Grand Pass and 21 from Borella, including 14 inmates of the Valikada prison as well as 4 from Vellampitiya. Following a hiatus, cases were also reported from the areas of Maharagama and Kaduvela. In the district breakdown of cases, Gampaha confirmed 135 cases, with 75 inmates of the Mahara prison being among them. 36 cases were reported from Kalutara, 27 from Gaul, 19 each from the district of Kandy and Kurunagala, 17 from Ampara, while 10 were recorded from Putlam. Positive cases were also detected in the districts of Jaffna, Anuradhapura, Ratnapura, Nurelia, Mathali, Badulla, Kegol, Vaunia, Hambantota and Monaragala as well as Matara. In the meantime, the Director General of Health Services confirmed another death caused by COVID-19 yesterday, raising the country's death toll to 147. The deceased was an 82-year-old woman residing in Colombo 13, whose immediate cause of death was identified as high blood pressure and COVID-19-induced pneumonia. Meanwhile, a sudden death of a 54-year-old COVID-19 infected man was reported in Ahungalla on the 9th, 3 days after the completion of his quarantine process. He had completed his quarantine period at a designated centre for 14 days, as well as his 14-day home quarantine process. His final rites were performed at the Ahungalla crematorium yesterday. Meanwhile, a 68-year-old man residing in the area of Mahavila in Panadura had died after falling off a bicycle. He, however, tested positive for COVID-19 during the post-mortem examination. His final rites were performed at the crematorium in Malamulla. In another development, former DIG Vaskunavardhana, who is currently serving his prison sentence in Valikada, has contracted COVID-19. Steps have been taken to refer him to the prison hospital. In the meantime, speaking to media, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana stated that health authorities have performed 1 million PCR tests in the country, with the highest single-day tests being performed yesterday.
As of today, approximately 1 million PCR tests have been conducted, and in addition to that, yesterday 17,000 PCR and antigen tests have been conducted. Therefore, the government and the health sector, we have taken all the measures in order to control the COVID-19.
What's more, health authorities have placed the total number of infections in the country at 32,125, with only 8,624 among them being active cases. With 473 people being given the all-clear to return to their daily lives today, the number of recoveries have increased to 23,304.
Now, Chief Epidemiologist Dr. Sudat Samaravira calls for public support in understanding and maintaining calm with regard to the burial issue of COVID-19 deceased. Dr. Samaravira went on to say that matters concerning health cannot be based on community practices but scientific evidence.
Now, there are many discussions going on whether COVID-19 prevention measures are targeting certain communities like Muslim communities because of their religious practices. We can't control a disease targeting a certain fraction of the society. What we are doing is study the disease spread. We see where the disease is spreading. We target in on that. The decision has been taken after expert opinion. Not only the medical expert, even the experts on water and soil has given their opinion, and based on that only that the decision has been taken that cremation is mandatory. But science is evolving. If new evidence are coming up in contrary, that will be evaluated. Similarly, for this disposal of dead bodies also, we will be evaluating the evidence from the other part of the world. We can change depending on the scientific evidence.
පෑලියගොඩ මිනුවන්ගොඩ ආශ්‍රිතව ආරම්භ වෙච්ච පොකුර මේ වෙනකොට සැලකිය යුතු මට්ටමකින් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. 27000කට එහා පැත්තේ ප්‍රමාණයක් මේ වෙනකොට වාර්තා වෙලා තියෙනවා. තිබුණට වඩා සංකීර්ණ තත්ත්වය නිර්මාණය වෙන්න ප්‍රධානම හේතුව තමයි කොළඹ මහනගර සභා සීමාව ඇතුළට කේන්ද්‍ර වෙලා තිබිච්ච අවදානම දිවයිනේ විවිධ තැන් වලින් උපපොකුරු විදිහට ව්‍යාප්ත වීමක් සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙන නිසා. කර්මාන්ත පුරයන්හි යම් අවදානම් තත්ත්වයක් මතුවලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේ තියෙන තත්ත්වය යටතේ අපේ පාලනය තුළ මේ මතුවෙන උපපොකුරු ටික තබා ගැනීමේ අභියෝගයට අපි අද මුහුණ දෙමින් ඉන්නවා. ඒ නිසා අපි රටක් විදිහට විශ්වාස කරනවා තාමත් අපි මේ පාලිත තත්ත්වයන් යටතේ මේක තියාගන්න පුළුවන් වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ දක්වා බහුතරයකින් ලැබිච්ච සහයෝගයත් එක්ක. ඒ නිසා ඒ බහුතර සහයෝගය ඉදිරි කාලය තුලත් ලැබුණොත් එහෙම මේ තත්ත්වය අපිට පාලනය කළා රටක් විදිහට දෙසැම්බර් මාසෙ ඉවරලා අලුත් අවුරුද්දක් උදා වෙනකොට ජනවාරි වල යම් පාලිත තත්ත්වයක් යටතේද රට විවෘත කළ නව සාමාන්‍යකරණයත් එක්ක ඉස්සරහට යන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා. මොකද දැන් ඊයේ අගමැතිතුමාගේ රැස්වීමේදී කියවෙච්ච දෙයක් තමයි දවස් 36ක කාලයක් මරණයට පත් වුණාට පස්සේ මෘතදේහ තුල වෛරසය තියෙන්න පුළුවන් කියන කාරණය. ඒතකොට ඒක භූගත ජල මට්ටමත් එක්ක කොහොමද වෙනස් වෙන්නේ? මේක මල්ටිෆැක්ටෝරියල් නම් අර අනිකුත් සියලුම සාධක සැලකිල්ලට අරගෙන සෞඛ්‍ය සාධක ප්‍රමුඛ කරගෙන නිවැරදි තීන්දුව ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කළ යුතුයි කියලා අපි කියනවා. මේක දේශපාලකයන්ටවත් ආගමික කණ්ඩායමකටවත් වෙනත් තනි පුද්ගලයවත් තීරණය කරනවට වඩා මේ විශේෂඥ කමිටුව විසින් අවසන් තීරණය ලබා දීම වැදගත් කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගීමත් දිවයකට ලංකාවේ පළමු වරට හඳුන්වා දෙන Melbourne Veggie Cracker Crunchy Veggie.
Now, in the meantime, the status of isolation was lifted from 6 housing complexes in the Colombo district this morning after 50 days of isolation. The decision was made after people in those housing complexes were PCR tested. In the meantime, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana says that public should constantly adhere to quarantine regulations and rules during the festive season in order to avoid any spread of COVID-19.
A total of 13 housing complexes located in the Colombo district were isolated in a bid to prevent the surge in COVID-19 infections detected at the relevant premises. However, Chief of the National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19, Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavindra Silva said that the isolation status on 6 housing complexes in Colombo was lifted with effect from 6 a.m. today. Accordingly, the housing complexes of Mid Sandasevana and Mihijaya Sevana in Modara Randiya Uyana in Mattakuliya, Modara Uyana and Samagipura in Grand Pass, as well as the Mihindu Senpura Uyana Dematagoda, were brought out of isolation this morning. The army commander also said that this decision to relax the isolation status was made following the results of PCR tests carried out in these housing complexes. However, the police areas where these urban flats are located will continue to be under isolation until further notice.
These condominiums are situated in lockdown areas. So therefore, the inmates of the condominiums, they can come out, they can move in the premises of the condominium area. However, they cannot move on roads as usually, and they cannot go on three-wheelers. They are not able to open up shops because the quarantine isolation order is being implemented in that respective police area. Therefore, they have to adhere with the blanket quarantine order in respect of that particular police area. So therefore, they cannot move as usually on roads and other areas because those areas have been locked down.
In other developments, travel restrictions were imposed in 7 Grama-Niladhari divisions in the Galle district following the identification of 25 COVID-19 infections. Accordingly, the Grama-Niladhari divisions of Milliduwa, Kongaha, Thalapitiya, Dangedara East, Dedugoda North and Makuluwa in Galle will be under travel restrictions until further notice. As the country is heading towards the festive season, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana calls on the people to adhere to quarantine rules and regulations in order to avoid any spread of COVID-19.
We would like to convey a message to everyone, especially how do you behave in the festive season. Now the festive season is coming and all the time you have to adhere with quarantine rules and regulations while shopping or moving on public transportation or leaving Western Province or Colombo district. All the times kindly adhere with quarantine rules and regulations and render your fullest support and cooperation in order to control COVID-19.
Now, the Civil Aviation Authority of Sri Lanka says that the island will resume operations of commercial and charter flights from the 26th of December this year. The Aviation Authority has informed the relevant authorities around the world of the proposed resumption of flight operations to Sri Lanka. As the aviation regulator of Sri Lanka, the CAASL will be disseminating the appropriate directives to the travel industry in due course regarding the opening of the country's airspace. We will see you once more on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the Presidential Commission probing the Easter Sunday terror attacks heard that former Minister Rishad Badidin had called the SSP who led investigations against Dr. Shafi Shihabdin of the Kurunegala General Hospital after the SSP and the DIG were transferred during mid-investigations. The former SSP in charge of the Kurunegala division said that Badidin called him on the very day that Dr. Shihabdin was granted bail, and the question had been, "Are you happy now?" Journalist Shirley Upulkumar of the BBC Sinhala service, who conducted an interview with former President Maithripala Sirisena on the Easter Sunday terror attacks, was summoned before the Presidential Commission investigating the attacks yesterday. He was summoned to inquire into a statement given by the former president to the Commission. The BBC Sinhala service had conducted the interview on the 14th of June, and during which former President Sirisena had said that he is not prepared to take the responsibility for the attack.
ඔබතුමා වකියුතු නැද්ද?
මොනවා ගැනද?
මේ පාස්කු ප්‍රහාරය සම්බන්ධ
While giving evidence before the commission recently, former President Sirisena had stated that the said interview had been edited with hatred towards him, with his views distorted. Journalist Shirley Upulkumara yesterday explained to the commission how the interview took place. The witness said that before the interview, he asked the former president whether there is a specific question which should be asked during the interview. The former president had said that there isn't and had told the journalist to ask any question he likes. The witness said that former President Sirisena became restless when he was asked about the Easter Sunday attacks. Though that was the case, he added that the former president took part in the interview as usual until the end. The witness went on to say that following the interview, the former president even posed for photographs with him with his arm around him and submitted those photographs to the commission. The commission asked the witness whether the recorded interview was edited before it was released on the internet. The witness responded, quote, "Yes, it was edited, but it wasn't edited in a way which distorts the meaning. Instances of hair being caught in the wind, sound of the wind, and repetitions were edited out. The responses are there with relevant questions," unquote. The commission then asked the witness whether there had been any influence from the former president or from any of his factions to either not to air the interview or to edit a certain section out. The witness said, quote, "No, there has not been any influence exerted on me or my place of employment. That interview is still there on our webpage and Facebook page," unquote. In the meantime, former Senior Superintendent of Police in charge of the Nuwara Division, Mahinda Disanayake, was summoned before the Presidential Commission today. It was to inquire about Zahran Hashim and his cohorts conducting a training camp in the area of Shantipura in Nuwara. During the proceedings, legal counsel representing the Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, asked the witness whether he knew Dr. Shafi Shabdeen of the Kurunegala General Hospital. The witness responded in the affirmative and said, quote, "I worked as the SSP in charge of Kurunegala Division from the 15th of May in 2018 until the 9th of August in 2019. I came to know of Shafi Shabdeen after the Easter attacks." The legal counsel representing His Eminence the Cardinal asked the witness whether he knew of any ties between Shafi Shabdeen and former Minister Rishad Badiuddin. The former SSP of the Kurunegala Division replied, quote, "Yes, I led the investigations on Shafi Shabdeen, during which it was revealed that there was a connection between Shafi Shabdeen and Rishad Badiuddin. It was also revealed that 440 million rupees had been transacted via Shafi's bank account in a very short period of time. When we asked Shafi about it, he asked us not to. That aroused suspicion. Dr. Shafi was arrested under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, but as the investigation progressed, both myself and the DIG were transferred. By then, my son had already sat for one subject in the GCE advanced level examination. I was severely inconvenienced. Then Dr. Shafi was granted bail, and on the same day, former Minister Rishad Badiuddin called me via telephone. He asked me, "Mr. Disanayake, are you well? Are you happy now?" unquote. We will see you shortly after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Ambassador of Afghanistan Ashraf Haidari believes that there is great potential for trade with Sri Lanka and the two parties should not wait for the pandemic to end to get the ball rolling. He expressed these sentiments during a discussion with Indivari Amwatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. Touching on the topic of terrorist elements, Ambassador Haidari said that Sri Lanka taught Afghanistan to be decisive.
Something I'd like to talk extensively is about de-radicalization, extremist elements, and about the war against drugs. You have penned your overall experience, including Sri Lanka's wartime experience and Sri Lanka's experience in eliminating terrorism. How long have you been here in Sri Lanka now?
Well, I've been here for the past 2 years, and of course the experience of Sri Lanka from war to peace is quite instructive, as you exactly pointed out. You fought separatism and terrorism for 3 decades, so Sri Lanka does have a lot of relevant combat experience against insurgency and terrorism. Our situation is a little bit more complex because we're not fighting a separatist terrorist network per se, but we are fighting a number of regional and global terrorist and extremist groups, all of which operate under the umbrella of the Taliban. These networks are still sheltered in the neighborhood and supported by certain state actors. I think we can learn lessons from Sri Lanka, mediated peace processes, if you recall, because as you were fighting the terrorists, you were also, pursuing a peace process, much like we are. And I think the lesson that we should learn from Sri Lanka is to be decisive. That's the lesson that I once discussed with His Excellency President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the Honorable Prime Minister. Our leadership completely agrees with them that unless you fight from a position of strength to secure peace, it's really hard to imagine that the terrorists would actually deliver peace at the negotiating table.
You did mention about conditions-based withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan. If you may shed some light into what particularly the top issues and conditions that will be put forward.
Well, conditions is all about violence. Violence drops down, there's a ceasefire, and confidence goes up, and people see that peace and security every day for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. In accordance with that, then forces could draw down. As we see peace as a peace dividend, forces could withdraw down, and these large amounts of funding is spent on maintaining international military presence in Afghanistan that could focus on sustainable development, on post-conflict reconstruction. Much like Sri Lanka, you ended your war in 2009, and since you've been focused on peace building, sustainable development in areas where fighting and destruction took place. I had a very productive visit to Jaffna, and I saw lots of ongoing projects. Things continue moving on there, and I think we should do the same thing.
I did see a press release recently that the Ceylon Chamber has identified Afghanistan as a potential market to further expand business with Sri Lanka. What areas are we looking at? You've also signed MOUs and certain partnership agreements on expanding trade and investment.
Yes, I think, yes, the pandemic is there and it's slowly being resolved, but we shouldn't wait for that. And I think we can work on so much groundwork that's there to be done, and that's exactly I've been focusing on, not waiting for the pandemic, not waiting for other challenges to be resolved in order to focus on trade, because trade is something that all nations need. Both Afghanistan and Sri Lanka cannot afford to just sit and do nothing. So we've moved on and signed this agreement between the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce and the Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce and Investment. I was working actually on a meeting to be arranged between the desk managers of the two chambers to explore export of Ceylon tea to Afghanistan, which I very much welcome, because the volume of trade, unfortunately, is so low between Afghanistan and Sri Lanka. We do more trade with Maldives than Sri Lanka. We have so many products such as tea, of course, textiles, apparel, coconut, and spices, and food and beverage, I think, which we import from the rest of the region. But quality-wise, I think Sri Lankan products are of higher quality, especially some of your biscuits that I've had, really good. And I've been promoting all of these to be exported to Afghanistan. And from Afghanistan, of course, we have dried nuts, fresh fruits, and I had a very good meeting with His Excellency President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He said that we have to have a flight between Kabul and Colombo. And he immediately helped arrange a meeting for me to see the executives of the Sri Lankan Airlines. And they were immediately interested because as they saw the demand not only in cargo, but also tourists from Afghanistan. Because Afghans have been to countries in the region a lot, but they like to explore further afield, which is Sri Lanka, of course, the paradise on earth and a friendly nation.
Now, on a concept of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, decommissioned buses of Sri Lanka Transport Board were transformed into modern and fully equipped libraries. AdaDerana partnered with Sri Lanka Telecom and Mobitel to make this endeavour a success. The first phase was launched under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on the International Children's Day, and accordingly 5 districts were provided with these buses. The second phase of the program will begin in January, with library buses set to be gifted for the remaining 20 districts. These library buses will contain reading facilities, Wi-Fi connectivity and other such support systems ready to enable children to connect with the information world. These libraries will act as learning centres that will provide equal opportunities for students with accessible educational resources and to help inculcate the habit of reading. The government has hit back at yesterday's rating downgrade by S&P Global, calling the move disappointing and premature. S&P downgraded Sri Lanka's credit rating to CCC+ from B-. Now, Moody's and Fitch Ratings also took similar rating action in the lead-up to S&P downgrade. In its response, the Ministry of Finance said that such action simply demonstrates the prejudicial approach without weighing the impact of alternative strategies of the government.
Following S&P Global's downgrade of Sri Lanka's sovereign credit to CCC+ from B- yesterday, the Sri Lankan government expressed its disappointment over the rating action. In a statement, the Ministry of Finance said that the rating action comes at a time when the Parliament has just passed, with an overwhelming majority, the new government's first full-year budget for 2021, which laid out a carefully crafted medium-term policy framework alongside a novel orientation for a solid recovery of the economy in the period ahead. The statement added that it is surprising to note that S&P in its assessment has ignored the envisaged medium-term positive developments as a result of several key proposals presented in the Government Budget 2021 with regard to fiscal consolidation and deficit financing in the period ahead. It says that, as indicated in the Budget 2021, the government has adopted a novel approach in relation to foreign financing while enhancing the effectiveness of already secured financing channels aimed at reducing the share of foreign financing of the budget deficit over the medium term. Yet, S&P in its medium-term projections grossly overstates the level of fiscal deficit and the external deficit of the country. In contrast, the Ministry of Finance says that the forward-looking financing model of the government, which is skewed heavily towards domestic financing, will capitalize on the benefits of increased domestic savings and the low interest rate regime already in place given the subdued levels of inflation and well-anchored inflation expectations at present. The statement added that reflecting the impact of measures already put in place by the government, the relative share of the outstanding foreign debt has declined notably at present. It went on to say that based on highly pessimistic assumptions, S&P projects a path of government debt to GDP ratio over 100% from 2021. This is mainly due to the unrealistic estimate of the budget deficits from 2021 without considering the spillovers from the economic recovery facilitated by significant policy stimulus already in place. Further, any increase in the share of domestic government debt in a low interest rate regime, and when the economic growth rate is expected to be above the real rate of interest, the government debt management would not be a major source of concern in the period ahead. It notes that it is also unrealistic to assume that the government will follow a rigid expenditure path, as the incentives offered to the private sector would provide much-needed capital formation in the economy, including foreign direct investment to major infrastructure development projects in the country. The recently introduced measures to entice foreign investors to the government securities market and the real economy through an attractive foreign exchange swap arrangement are likely to help enhance foreign currency inflows in the near term. The Ministry of Finance also says that the government is expecting the disbursement of the second tranche of the foreign currency term financing facility proceeds from the China Development Bank in early 2021. What's more, both fiscal and monetary policies have placed an overly emphasis in supporting people and businesses amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, thereby ensuring a sustainable and equitable economic recovery without jeopardizing the macroeconomic balance of the country.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.